Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Crime and Punishment story. This week I am covering the strange story of Daniel Gaffney and the murder of Mary Wolfe, which took place in North Shields in 1879. I hope you will find it interesting. But before we begin, can I just say, if you do enjoy this video, then please give it a thumbs up. And if you are new here or haven't already done so, then do please consider subscribing to the channel to help support the content we create. Thank you. And I would just like to add, as I always do now, that I do record these stories live, so I do sometimes make mistakes, which I always try to rectify. So I hope this does not spoil your enjoyment of the video. Sadly, there is little to no information about the past life of Daniel Gaffney. It is known that he had lodged with Mary Wolfe in North Shields and that he had been known to ill-use her. He did still visit her home, but he no longer lived there. And although he is not described as being a heavy drinker, it was said that he did like a drink now and then. His age, date of birth, birth location and parents are unknown. He was said at the time to be working as a labourer, but it is not known where he worked. Mary Wolfe, the victim, was born Mary Harrison in Tynemouth in around 1837 to parents William and Elizabeth, and she was one of at least 3 children. Although the date and the name of her husband are unknown, she was married sometime between 1861 and 1871. However, by 1871 she was a widow and was living with her elderly parents in North Shields, and her job was given as a dressmaker. Now it can only be assumed that her elderly parents had died and that she had taken over the property, and the reason that she took in lodgers was to help with the costs of the home. On the night of Monday, April the 28th, 1878, a neighbour saw Mary Wolfe standing by her door in Middle Street, North Shields. Shortly after this, a man was heard heading up to her room, followed by a second man. The second man was known to be Daniel Gaffney, who had previously lodged with Mary. However, the first man is never identified. All was quiet for a while, then the first man left, leaving Mary alone with Daniel. And at this point an argument broke out, and the neighbours thought that Daniel had knocked Mary to the ground, and she was then heard to scream. Just after this she was seen to run down the stairs and out into the backyard, holding her head in her hands and crying, with Daniel following close behind her. He did not stop in the yard for long. He simply swore at her and then left. A short time later, Mary knocked on the door of one of her neighbours, saying she was going away, and asking her to make sure that Daniel did not get inside her rooms while she was gone. And Mary returned to her home on the Thursday of the same week. By this time she was quite ill. She was complaining that her side was sore, and she was saying that Daniel had ill-used her. And later on that same Thursday night, a neighbour, Mrs. Courtney, found Mary lying on the floor in great pain. She helped her into bed, and the following morning her family and a doctor was sent for. Mary regained consciousness on the Saturday and told her sister, Elizabeth, that she had been knocked off her chair and had a lot of pain in her side. Dr. Tyndall, who had been sent for and was treating her to the best of his ability, was sadly unable to save her, and Mary did not recover, and she died on Monday, May the 5th, 1879. After this, the police were sent for, and they were told of how Daniel often used to ill-use Mary, and they went in search of him in the North Shields area. He was finally found on the Thursday night and was arrested on the charge of the wilful murder of Mary Wolfe, to which he made no reply. The inquest was opened at the Ship Inn at North Shields before Coroner Cockcroft. Elizabeth Stubbs of William Street West, North Shields, said she had identified the body as being that of her sister Mary Wolfe, who was around 42 years old. She said Mary had visited her house on April the 28th. She said she had complained of pain in her side and her arm. The following Friday, Elizabeth said she had been sent for to go to Mary's house as she was now very ill. She said she had regained consciousness on the Saturday when she had complained of great pain in her side. Elizabeth said Mary told her she had been knocked off her chair and had fallen on a desk in the room. She stated Mary said she had been given her death blow and was sure her life had been shortened. She said later that day Daniel had called at the house. He had asked Mary how she was, but she did not reply to him. And Daniel, Elizabeth said, made some comment about being blamed for striking Mary. But at this, she said, Mary simply shook her head, but she did not speak, and Daniel left. Susanna Courtney of North Shields said she had seen Mary standing by her door on Monday night, April 28th. Shortly after this, she said she heard the sound of an unknown man heading to her room, followed a short time later by a second man, and the second man she knew to be Daniel Gaffney. She said it was quiet while both men were in Mary's room, but when the unknown man left, she heard Daniel and Mary arguing. She said she was used to hearing them argue. While Daniel had lodged with Mary, they had had frequent arguments, and it was believed by most of the neighbours that Daniel had ill-used her. Mary was often known to run out of her home shrieking and crying, and she sometimes stayed away overnight, but she did not really speak to the neighbours about much of what was happening, and she never went to the police. She continued by saying on the Monday night she heard Mary shout out, "Now drop it, what are you going to hit me for? I have done nothing." She said Daniel had left a few moments after this, but he returned very soon afterwards, and it was then that she heard the sound of what seemed to be someone falling on the floor, and then she heard Mary screaming. Mary, she said, then ran down the stairs into the yard. She saw her standing in the yard, holding her head in her hands and crying. Daniel had followed her out. She said he swore at her once, then left the yard, and she believed that Daniel had been drinking. After this, Mary left the house, asking her to make sure that Daniel could not get inside while she was away. But Susanna said she did not see him during this time. On Mary's return on the Thursday night, she seemed to be much worse, and she said she later found her lying on the floor. With some help from another neighbour, she put her to bed, and the following morning she sent for her family. Dr. Tyndall said he had been sent for on Friday, May the 2nd. He found Mary in bed almost insensible. She was unable to answer any questions and her breathing was very quiet. He examined her and he found both her chest and back to be swollen and to be causing Mary so much pain that she had cried out when he had tried to roll her onto her side. He said on her back, near one of her shoulders, she had a swelling the size of a palm of the hand, which was almost black. He said he had returned to see her again at around 11 p.m. the same night, and she was very much the same with little sign of improvement. He visited again the following morning, and he thought that she seemed a little better, as she had been able to speak to him. However, she had sadly died of her wounds the following Monday. Dr. Tyndall continued saying that along with Dr. McLaren he had performed the post-mortem on the body of Mary Wolfe. He said it was his professional opinion that death had been caused by pleurisy, inflammation and congestion of the lungs, and felt that this had been caused by being struck a blow in the area of the chest. He said this was not something that could have been caused by anything other than a blow. Dr. McLaren spoke only to confirm his agreement with Dr. Tyndall's statement. The inquest at this point was adjourned to allow more evidence to be collected, and it would be resumed a few days later at the town hall in North Shields. Mary Howe of North Shields said she knew Mary Wolfe. She had been at her home on April the 28th when she had returned home from her day's work. She said Mary Wolfe was complaining of pain, and she had asked her if she could stay there overnight, to which Mary Howe had said yes. Mary Howe said Mary Wolfe had told her she had hurt herself carrying a heavy pail of water. However, she had also added, "That man's been to the house, he wanted some stockings, he struck me in the side, and I believe it has made my arm worse." Mary Howe said that Mary Wolfe had stopped at her home on the Monday night and the Tuesday and on the Wednesday. She said she had sent her to the chemist. However, it is not known if the chemist gave her any medication. She said Mary Wolfe left to go back to her own home on the Thursday, and she did not see her again until Friday when she was called to the house. And it was then that she had found Mary lying on the floor unable to speak, and she helped Mrs. Courtney to put her to bed and sent for a doctor. Alice Stoker said she was the wife of a grocer in Middle Street, North Shields. She said she also knew Mary Wolfe. She said on April the 28th, Mary had ran into their shop and then ran behind the counter, saying, "Oh, that man, see what an ear I've got." Alice said Mary's ear did not look right, as if it had been hit or punched. She stated that she had seen Daniel run past the shop after Mary came inside, but she did not see the two speaking at any time. Alice said her husband advised Mary to go for the police, but she said she would not, but she was still afraid to leave the shop. And Alice said they looked outside to see if Daniel was gone, and then another neighbour took Mary back to her home. Mary Monroe of North Shields said Daniel Gaffney had been lodging with herself and her husband for around 6 or 7 weeks. She said on the day of April the 28th he had been in and out of their house several times. She said he had been drinking, but she did not think that he was drunk, and he did not mention anything about Mary Wolfe that day or during the following days. She said on May the 3rd she had visited Mary with Mrs. Courtney, and while she was there Daniel had called as he had been told that Mary was ill. She said he asked how she was, but she said no one replied, so he then went up to Mary and said, "Mary, what is wrong with you?" But she did not reply. She said she spoke to him herself, saying, "Dan, they say you have been hitting her in the side." To which he replied, addressing Mary, "I am sure I never touched you, Mary, and no one person ever saw me touch you." She said he left, saying he would call again, which he did on the Sunday. She said that day Mary was a little better, and she said that Daniel told her over and over again that he had never touched her. I did not find any details of any evidence given by the police at the inquest, although it was said that Inspector Hunter had arrested Daniel, having been told of his ill-using Mary, and on the suspicion that her death had been caused by the injuries that had been inflicted by Daniel. The coroner then summed up the evidence to the jury, although no details are given as to what he actually said. The jury, who retired for only a few minutes, returned the verdict that Mary had died due to pleurisy and inflammation of the chest due to the injuries she had received, but that they felt the evidence was not conclusive as to how those injuries had been caused. And because of this, Daniel Gaffney was then discharged and was free to go. I did not find any evidence of a funeral for Mary Wolfe. However, as she did have family in the area, it is to be hoped that she did not have a pauper's funeral. Funerals, as I have mentioned before, are not always covered in the local papers unless they are quite large ones. I did not find any evidence of a headstone for Mary anywhere in the area. Shortly after the inquest had been reported, a letter appeared in one of the local papers discussing the case. It stated that the jury had no option other than to reach the verdict that they had come to based on the evidence given, stating that one of the problems had been that Mary had frequently covered up for Daniel and his ill use of her, leaving no real evidence of him having attacked her. And it also added that had she complained about his abuse to the police, then the outcome of the inquest would most likely have been very different. And it was signed one of the jury. I did not find any further evidence of Daniel Gaffney after the inquest, so it is to be hoped that he kept out of trouble after this. This was a very odd case. On the one hand, it seems Mary often spoke to the neighbours of Daniel ill-using her, but on the other hand, she did not make any complaints to the police about it. And also, when, according to one witness, Daniel said he would be blamed for striking her, she had shook her head as if to say she would not blame him. I personally feel it is clear that he did abuse her to some extent, but was he responsible for her death? Well, the doctor seemed to believe her illness could have only been caused by a blow to her chest, and her injuries do seem to be much more than something that could have been caused by someone carrying a heavy pail of water. So I do think he was responsible, and he should not really have been set free. But were the jury at the inquest correct to come to the verdict they did? Well, it does seem that without any evidence of Daniel attacking her, it could not be proven, and they could not really find him guilty based on some of the witnesses saying that Mary had spoken of him ill-using her. It was, as they said, insufficient evidence. But what do you think? Do you think Daniel had been ill-using Mary? Do you think he was responsible for the injuries that led to her death? And do you think the jury reached the correct verdict, or do you think he should have been found guilty of manslaughter? Do let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I do hope that you have found this sad and tragic story interesting. Another that again seems to have had no punishment to go with the crime. I do thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again very soon.